The Day of the Dead is based on what have become Mexican and Latin American beliefs around death, around accepting and embracing death as a natural part of life rather than as something to be feared. Death as natural, respected, even beautiful and joyful, even something to be celebrated and remembered as part of our natural human cycle. Even though these are today's Mexican beliefs around deaths, they do have Mesoamerican antecedents. Our Mesoamerican heritage greatly influences the way that we not only perceive death, but what the Day of the Dead means to us and how it has evolved over time. And that could be, for example, a reunification with our ancestors, and that we can continue, for the living can continue to both commune and have time with their dead during these particular days. We still consider this a coronation of the harvest, in that we reap the fruits of what we planted into the earth. We share those with our ancestors. It's perfect for it to fall during this time in the calendar, now that the seasons have changed and that the harvest can be shared. And also gratitude to the Creator, gratitude to Mother Earth. That's also implemented in today's beliefs around the Day of the Dead. And we have two different types of altares that are built for the Days of the Dead. The first one is a home altar. That's the one that we build in our homes. And the second one is the altar that is built at the actual grave sites in cemeteries. In the United States, we have a great deal of regulations around building altares in cemeteries. It's more popular here in the United States for folks to build altares in their homes, or for folks to build altares as public remembrances outside in the outdoors, or even inside of institutions that host them, like museums or cultural centers. But in Mexico, the altar making practices at grave sites definitely still exist. Typically, any altar in the home or on the gravesite features a photograph of the deceased to remember, how they were in life and what their image was when they were alive. Special objects are placed in home altares, objects that belong to the dead when they were still alive. It could be anything from trophies that they won while they were living. It could be toys that they really enjoyed in their childhood, or if they died as children that they enjoyed when they were alive. It could be special, clothing that belonged to them, or just any sort of memento that reminds you of who they were when they were alive. Candles as well represent fire, and candles also represent faith and love in the Catholic traditions. The flower of Cempasúchil, which today we know as the marigold. Cempasúchil is the Nahuatl Aztec language word for the marigold. And Cempasúchils are important because they represent Mother Nature, and also it's believed that the scent of the flowers is so strong and powerful that it will lead the dead from their grave sites or from their spirit world to visit your home, or to visit, their altares wherever they may be located. The same thing with food, is that the scent of the food is also believed to lead our loved ones to visit us where we place their altares. Sugar skulls as well. Sugar skulls represent the disarticulation of bodies and also the production of new life. And this was an Aztec Mexica belief. If you ever get a chance to visit some of our archaeological sites in central Mexico, in Mexico City, what used to be the city of Tenochtitlan, you'll notice a lot of skull imagery. So the skull imagery comes directly from our Mesoamerican ancestors who associated it with war and with death. And lastly, pan de muertos, or the bread of the dead, which remind us of the way that Mesoamericans used to play these loaves of amaranth on these grave sites and on these altares as well. In terms of the process at the actual grave sites, it's very important to clean the grave itself. People really take pride in those grave sites being impeccable before they place their altares down. Then there's usually some sort of a blanket or a doily that's placed on the gravesite in order to start building what will be your altar. Ceremonial pottery, baskets, usually placed on there to hold fruit, sometimes vegetables. There are candle paths in the cemetery that are built to provide light to lead the dead to their particular altares. In indigenous communities, we also build wooden arches. They're wrapped around with cempasúchils, with marigolds all around the arch. They look quite beautiful. These arches represented the deceased person's departure from the spirit world and arrival into the physical world as an entrance to the world of the living. So these arcos are still part of the way that we observe the Day of the Dead in indigenous communities. At the cemetery as well, at the gravesites, all night wakes are held. People spend the entire night with their loved ones, and they typically end with the giving and sharing of food with other people that are at the cemetery observing the Day of the Dead with you. And typically food is gifted or exchanged in Purepecha communities. For example, the next day in the morning, children will come around with baskets or bags, and you'll typically give them the fruit that was originally placed on the altar. Dish exchanges happen between families, so there will be different dishes that a family will cook depending on what their loved one like, and so everybody sort of takes some of that home. But what's interesting too is that it's believed that the food actually tastes different the next morning, that it smells differently, because the dead are said to have already partaken in the feast. And so people will be, sort of smelling, their food to notice a different scent the next morning, to realize that their loved ones were there and they partook in the feast and shared it with them. Today, there are specific dates for specific types of deaths. And the 28th of October, for example, is the day that in Mexico we remember violent deaths, people who died from violent, deaths, like, car accidents or homicide or whatever it might have been, that was violent in nature. And it's also the day that we remember the Anima Sola, and we build an altar for the Anima Sola in the community for people who don't have, anybody who, remembers them or builds altares for them anymore. And then finally, on November 1st is the night that starts to commemorate all souls and all spirits. And so that's when the adults would be incorporated to be remembered as well, and for their altares to sit all night with them the night of November 1st and onto the morning of November 2nd.